Welcome back, everybody, to the XR Summit at University of Michigan. We are really, really excited here. We have another fantastic panel, and I'm super honored and excited to introduce the panel. We have Jonathan Rule, Shalonda Reeves, Joanna Milinchuk, and Anil, say it for me.
Anil Chamje.
Chamje, that's right. Okay, so I'm going to read their bios, and we'll start a conversation. Joanna Milinchuk is Associate Dean of Undergraduate Education and Professor of Materials Science and Engineering, overseeing all aspects of the College of Engineering's undergraduate program. A key focus of her deanship centers on engaging faculty, staff, and students around experiential learning and how to leverage these types of activities to attract traditionally underrepresented groups to the STEM fields. Professor Milinchuk received her bachelor's in science in physics from DePaul University and PhD in material science and engineering from Northwestern. She is currently developing virtual and augmented reality learning tools to help students learn concepts in the physical sciences. Anil Chamje is an assistant professor of performing arts and technology at the University of Michigan. His research lies at the intersection of virtual reality, spatial audio, and human-computer interaction. This will be fun. He has previously worked with the University of Illinois at Chicago's Electronic Visualization Lab and founded the Sonic Arts graduate program at the Istanbul Technical University. His research and artistic work have been presented throughout the world in leading conferences and journals, and he's currently authoring a book titled Virtual Reality Audio. Wow, awesome. Jonathan Rule is an assistant professor of the practice of engineering at the University of Michigan, Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning, where he teaches in areas of design, construction, and digital technologies. He has been practicing architecture in Spain, lucky guy, since 2008 and is a co-founder of the studio Morcillo Parrales and Rule Arquitectos. The practice incorporates a wide range of topologies and scales in architecture and urban design and has won open design competitions in both Spain and the United States, including one called The Waterfall, a public space installation on a suspension bridge, which received the 2018 ACSA Faculty Design Award. In addition to this practice, his research focuses on materials, construction systems, and building design and technology with extended reality. And last but certainly not least, Shalonda Reeves. As a learning experience designer, Shalonda partners with faculty in designing online learning and extended reality-enabled education experiences. Her designs are grounded in theoretical approaches, for example, multimedia learning, sense-making, but also geared towards supporting the goals of the overall learning experience. She is a key member of the XR initiative at the University of Michigan and supports the pedagogical design of XR experiences being created. Welcome, everybody. We're very, very proud and excited to have you on this incredible panel. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with Joanna, and then we'll go around in a circle and we'll introduce you yourselves and what you're working on, and really a chance for you to share the great work that you're working on at the university. Joanna.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. I'm so honored to be here. I got so engrossed in the conversation in the previous session that I almost forgot to come backstage. So I'm really excited to be here. So one of the things that I'd like to talk about is the work that we're doing here in engineering with regard to XR. So as you heard from the introduction, I'm very much interested in using all kinds of technologies in order to teach engineering and science concepts better for our students. I got very interested in XR in particular to teach crystallography. So crystallography, for those of you who don't know, is just the atomic arrangements of atoms in all materials. And the reason why this is important is because the arrangement of atoms, even at that atomic level, is incredibly important to the properties of the material. It tells us why metals are strong yet ductile, and why ceramics tend to be insulators and very, very brittle. But understanding where those atoms are is very complicated. These are three-dimensional network structures that are complex and hard to really understand in 2D diagrams, such as in textbooks and in diagrams. So we started working on this, trying to get these crystal structures into virtual and augmented reality. When I became associate dean, I wanted to help my faculty also develop XR technologies in their own classrooms. So we have a fairly, it's a medium-sized program that provides faculty with the funding, the time, and the infrastructure to develop XR to teach different kinds of concepts within their courses. And so I just have a couple shown here. One that is really cool, that is similar to the kinds of things that we heard in the previous panel discussion, is XR for teaching disaster engineering. So clearly, we can't bring students into disaster zones and show them all the reasons and all the ways in which we need to do disaster engineering. Doing it in VR is a really great way of doing that. Near and dear to my heart, though, is visualizing thermodynamics. These diagrams are often multidimensional and hard to visualize in 2D. And so this is an augmented reality app that helps students understand these diagrams better. And of course, the other kind of work that we need to do is we really do need to understand how students, how their spatial abilities can be either supplemented, enhanced, using these kinds of technologies. So, you know, it's a fairly large program. I myself am very interested in these things, but also I'm very interested in creating a larger community within the engineering professoriate to start using these this tech in the classrooms.
So amazing, Joanna. You know, to your point around arranging atoms, there's an educational experience that's available in the Quest, and I got to learn about how graphite and diamonds are the same thing, but the way they're
exactly.
You know, that's the difference between graphite and diamonds, is how the atoms are arranged, and I think it's really amazing. And not obviously we can't be the size of an atom, but being in VR, you can have any infinite scale, large or small. So you can,
yeah, exactly.
At one hand, look at all of the universe in in your hand, and then be a molecule at the same time. It's really incredible. So we'll go that way. Jonathan, please let us know about what you're working on.
Yeah, hi. So thanks again for the invitation to participate in this panel. It's great to be here. So what I've been working on at the School of Architecture are two things. The first is I teach the core construction course for both undergraduate and graduate students who don't have a background in architecture. And with this course, what we're trying to do is update it a little bit and begin to bring in XR technologies into the learning experience. So as you can see in Alan's background, this is augmented tectonics, we're calling it, and it's basically almost like a museum or a new textbook for learning architecture and construction, where students can begin to interact with 3D objects at a one-to-one scale, as opposed to trying to learn through a PowerPoint presentation or something that is two-dimensional and flat. And so what we're trying to do is through this, we have somewhat of a lack of access to construction sites, and it's very difficult to learn some of these things without being able to interact with them at a one-to-one scale or inhabit them and embody these spaces. So this kind of new technology allows us to do that from the comfort of our own homes or from our classrooms. So in addition to that, what I'm also working on is world building, or trying to understand the ways that these technologies can afford new ways of looking at spaces, and how can we begin to design them in different ways. And I'm doing that through my course, a seminar course that's actually also titled Augmented Tectonics, where students are learning these new technologies and how to develop them themselves, as opposed to relying on other resources that might be like prefabricated softwares that they can begin to plug their models into. But how can they begin to kind of start from scratch and develop their own experiences in design? How can that begin to afford new ways of representation and understanding spatial concepts as they design them?
Super cool. You know, I'm starting to wonder who's really going to be teaching who soon. The students seem to be, you know, learning and being able to teach themselves and learning new techniques. So it's like a virtuous cycle of learning. Shalonda, if you want to introduce yourself and the work you're doing. Thank you, Jonathan.
I'm Shalonda Reeves. I'm a learning experience designer within the XR initiative, and I work with these wonderful faculty members to bring their experiences to life. I really focus on design concepts, and pedagogical approaches to teaching with virtual reality in residential courses. I work with them on implementation strategies, as well as how to properly use affordances within the environments to support meaningful learning.
Maybe can you elaborate on that a little bit? Oh,
so you have different, outcomes that faculty are looking for students to have at the end of the experience. And so there are some affordances, be it Joanna, she has the 3D, students can actually see crystals in the 3D form, and they're able to experience, maybe move around, expand. You may be able to have, where in Jonathan's course, we had students actually go through building and being able to see things to scale, as you said before, which you can't really see in a physical environment. And so, sorry, XR didn't pay for babysitters.
Hello. Hi, sweetheart. Awesome.
And so so I work with faculty to see what affordances within the environment can support their learning, students' learning, and then how can the affordances be used in a way that extends beyond what can happen in the classroom, because that's really the point. It's not to really duplicate, but extend beyond what can actually happen.
I love it. Extend the realities. Thank you, Shalonda. And last, Anil. Unmute yourself there. There you go.
I'm shrink myself as well.
There you go. You're good. Sorry, carry on.
Let me shrink myself a little bit. There we go. All right. So my name is Anil Chamje. My involvement in XR spans a range of research and instructional activities. I teach a course called Immersive Media, which is a heavily practice-based course that explores various applications of AR and VR technologies in performing arts. This course is also a part of our university-wide graduate certificate program on XR. One of the main areas of research that I'm involved in is creativity support in XR, exploring how we create, interact with, and consume immersive experiences. I developed a cross-platform and cross-reality tool called Inviso, which is a design tool for sonic virtual realities targeted at both novice and expert users. We have desktop, AR, and VR versions of the platform, and recently we started beta testing multi-user applications across XR platforms. So for instance, a student can be designing a sonic space in their room in AR, and their teacher can be monitoring and editing that same space in real time on their desktop or also in XR. I collaborate with schools of medicine and nursing on a project called Alarm VR, where we explore the perceptual factors contributing to alarm fatigue in clinical environments. The VR ICU that we designed allows us to explore this issue in an immersive context without interfering with patient care. We envision this both as a training tool and a participatory design environment where stakeholders can contribute to design of future clinical alarms. And finally, in another project called Hyperreal Instruments, I explore the interactions between VR and fabrication, which on the outset sound like they're at odds with each other, but we leverage our ability to bring digital designs into both virtual and physical realities and spatially align them to explore the continuity between the unique affordances of VR in, say, defying physics and the inherent roles of physicality and tactility in musical expression. I'm involved in a range of other interdisciplinary projects at the intersection of XR and learning, but maybe I'll leave those to the panel discussion and cut it off here. So thank you.
So much. That is fantastic. As you're talking, I kept thinking, I've had two really bad experiences in VR, especially with the wrong, with audio. One, I actually had the headphones on backwards. So the guy was talking to me from over here when it was that was just weird. And I couldn't, for the life of me, I didn't think to turn the headphones around, but that really messed my brain up.
Yeah.
But one of the
That's
amazing
disorienting.
things,
Yeah.
if anybody has a Magic Leap, there's an experience on the Magic Leap that came kind of a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago, and it's a sonic experience where you can take a ball of light and you can put it 10 feet away and walk away from it. That sound is spatial, and you can see it 10 feet away, and it sounds like it's 10 feet away. It's just, audio is one of the often overlooked aspects of it. And if you looked at what Mark was talking about today with the Disney stuff earlier, without audio, none of that works. None of it. So it's an often overlooked thing, especially in education and training, because we're all just learning, okay, does this even work? And then kind of audio becomes an afterthought. And I think it's just super important to note that Magic Leap raised $3.5 billion, put it in, a lot of that into this headset, and this headset has spatial audio. The new AirPods Pro also have the ability to do spatial audio. The Bose frames had a spatial audio system built into them. So I think manufacturers of electronics are starting to realize the importance of audio now that everybody is augmented. Maybe we're not wearing glasses, but almost everybody walking down the street is wearing a pair of headphones. So we're already augmenting our environment through audio. So thank you. It's really, really important research.
Yeah, it's definitely in the earlier conceptions of virtual realities, but now we're finding our way back into it. So it's really exciting to see these kinds of developments in the audio space.
I come from the audio world. I was a DJ for 20 years, and then we invented the emulator, a big see-through touchscreen DJ controller. So
nice.
Audio has a soft spot in my heart. Excuse me, Joanna. And do you want to maybe expand a little bit more on the work that you're doing, and really let's dig into kind of some specifics, if we could. What are you seeing from like, how are you measuring success, I guess, and then across that, and
yeah, that's a great. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to ask,
sorry,
how
please.
are you measuring success, and what is what are the KPIs around that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because the thing that I'm most interested in is how can we use XR in order to really change the way that we teach and change the way students learn. The way that I'd like to think about where XR can be helpful in teaching engineering in particular is, we live in a three-dimensional, multi-dimensional universe. But the issue is that when we come down to knowledge, the way that we write, that's one-dimensional, right? And calculus, if you will, just stick with me for a second, I would like to make the argument that calculus is a way for us to be able to render the multidimensional world in a single dimension, right? And so we now, and those are called equations, and we take those equations and we manipulate reality, and we can do science with that. Now, I would like to submit that, if we have different ways of thinking about science other than by equation, and if we have other ways that we can manipulate the physical world, then we can do science completely differently, right? So this is really a completely different philosophy. If you think about how files are organized on a computer, it looks very linear, right? I mean, it's just a hierarchical tree. Well, what if we had multi-dimensions, and we can change the way we think about that? We are three-dimensional animals. If you take a look at the history of art, as if, for instance, sculpture was always way ahead of, two-dimensional drawing. And it wasn't until people discovered how to, exactly, right. I mean, if you take a look at these objects, three-dimensional objects that people used to make, they were wonderful and beautiful, but you look at their two-dimensional sketches, drawings, and so forth, they weren't actually all that realistic until fairly recently in human history. So imagine how quickly science can go if we just change the way we think about it, if we move away from this one-dimensional way of thinking about it to multi-dimensional ways of thinking about it. But the thing is, and this is the question that you asked, because I just answered a different question. The thing is that we don't actually know how to use XR in these contexts, right? I mean, we are just now developing content. People are, doing amazing things. I mean, I heard what Disney is doing, and wow, right? But what are the ways to use this technology to teach people, we're still very much in the dark about that. So I would just like all of us to play as much as possible and try things as much as possible so that we get used to being in this space so that eventually we can understand how to do this better. Yeah, you asked me, how do we know when we're successful? That's the problem. We don't. We need to figure that out still. So big, long meandering to your answer.
No, it's fantastic. You know, in business, it's easy. You measure productivity outputs. But in education, it becomes a little bit, you know, we used to use test scores as the measurement of success. And, you know, when I say used to, I think COVID just smashed that, because nobody cares about test scores anymore. It really is inconsequential. What's really important is, can you learn fast, and can you relearn different things as fast as they are being thrown at you? Because, you know, I had an interesting meeting with a friend of mine. She just graduated from not University of Michigan, but she graduated in marketing, and a year just before COVID. And she said, man, I spent 4 years, racked up $40,000 in debt, and everything I learned is useless. It's obsolete. You know, sciences are different. You know, you're not, molecules aren't going to change. You know, physics, you know, it doesn't change. So, but I think, you know, the way we consume these and the way we test people and the way we, you know, bring people along for the educational ride is very important. So, Jonathan, Jonathan, you've been kind of nodding your head there as well. So I'll pass it over to Jonathan, and let's talk about, you know, what defines success for you in the work that you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I agree with Joanna. We kind of don't know. It's sort of, that's the thing we need to determine. I think within the work that I've been doing at the School of Architecture, we've been trying to build in metrics into this environment that we're creating, to see really, like, if going from a paper-based sort of testing system to sort of a virtual digital one, what are those changes? What do those things begin to look like? And then are the students responding better to the virtual version as opposed to the traditional way of learning? So right now we're playing, basically, literally, trying to figure out if this is going to actually work, if it's beneficial, if it's not beneficial, and in consultation with Shalanda, really trying to fine tune that. I don't think we've gotten to a point within what we've built so far that is going to really tell us that it is a success or not. We have qualitative feedback from the students on sort of how they're responding to the project and to the work. But I think until we have the full final build, and we can really kind of test it over a series of years, and that's when we'll really, I think, find out if the ability to understand some of the concepts that we're trying to teach through virtual reality are correct, or our assumptions that virtual reality will enhance students' learning are correct. So I think it's sort of a time game at this point. I think it's a little bit of waiting and play testing and seeing if things work or not. I mean, the play testing right now is purely been, are we, as the designer of the environment, creating one that the students are being able to respond to well. And we've kind of made certain assumptions, as we do when we design even buildings, and then we do post-occupancy studies on those buildings to see if the people that are inhabiting them are inhabiting them in the same way that we kind of envision that to be. And so I think that's sort of what's happening with these softwares or these learning environments in virtual reality. It's the same thing. We have to go through, play test with the students, see how they respond, adjust, and then keep moving forward. So it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. It's going to be a process over time.
Jonathan, I have a question, actually, completely unrelated to the last one. You know, when you're building a space, a physical, you know, designing a space, I'm assuming now with AI, you can populate it, say, okay, this is 100% the capacity of a space, or 80% or whatever. I guess, and you know, and I don't want to say traffic flows, but flows of people, right? You know, now, do you ever find that you kind of run these simulations, and then, you know, when you look at the building when it's built and constructed, that the way people move through the building is nothing what you had predicted?
Yeah, I think that happens sometimes. I think the algorithms that are set up, they're there and they're not perfect. I don't think anything right now is perfect. So they're pretty close. Actually, they're pretty close, but they're definitely not perfect. So and we as humans aren't going to always act the way that the machine thinks that we should act. So it's sort of interesting to see that. I mean, but to say I guess they're close is pretty good, but not perfect.
Amazing, so cool. Shalonda, on the previous point about measuring ROI, or in business everybody measures ROI. In education, it's what is that kind of gold standard that we're trying to attain? Because look, if we're saying VR's or AR, this technologies, XR are better medium for communications, compared to what? Compared to a book? Compared to my phone? Compared to podcasts? Right now we're in the attention economy, and so we're educators are vying and competing for attention with AAA movies, TikTok, Snapchat, social media, video games. And so what can we do as educators, as people to compete with that? Because I think at the end of the day, the measurement of success is how much of the attention of the learner can you get, retain, and get their attention so that they believe in it and they want to continue.
Right. So I think success is not a one-to-one transfer. So I don't think it should be a comparison between what they did before versus what they do now. You're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to oranges, because, in Joanna's case, I couldn't see the crystal before. Now I can. And now you want to know, is there a difference? Well, there's a whole lot of variables that go in between. And so I think what we really want to understand in our plane, as Joanna said, is understand for whom and under what conditions could this technology work. And so that lets you know that it may work for some, but not others. If I had no access, now I have access. Well, that works for me. If I have an experience that supplements another experience that I had, a traditional experience, well, that may be better as well. But it may also, it's different if I'm a novice learner versus a more advanced learner. And it may be different if, English isn't my first language versus English is my first language. I mean, there's so many variables. And I think that's the problem that we have now, is that we assume learners are monoliths, and they're not. They're varied people, and they have varied personalities and various needs. And I think XR, what it allows is another varied approach to how we teach. And so it may not replace anything, but, having a door that can open itself for individuals who aren't able to open them door for themselves doesn't eliminate doors. It just provides access for individuals. And so that's kind of how I look at what success is. It providing access, and does it meet a need that wasn't met before?
I love it. And I think as the costs of these things go down dramatically, it really unlocks a huge opportunity for learners. I mean, what is it? Oculus Quest is $400, $399, $400, something like that. Think about that. That could be a science lab. It could be an engineering lab. It could be. It's just like buying a phone, but it could be so many. It could be so many environments. It could be so many things. And I don't think we've ever created something that obviously we have. It's called the phone. I mean, it's super useful. I don't know how many apps you use on your phone every day, but I can do everything from measure distance to order a pizza. It's incredible the things I can do on my phone now, and I think we're only just beginning to realize what can we put in these glasses, these magical glasses that allow me to be in a different environment and interact with people. And then how do I bridge that between VR, AR, people on a computer, phones, and bridge that gap? I was on a talk with a launch meeting with Spatial, the team at Spatial. They've an app for HoloLens and Quest. And I was in the Quest, and there was people in there from HoloLens, there was people in from a computer. It was just a really, really great experience of having a number of people together in a space. And because it was a time and place, it was kind of like our AltSpace meeting last night. It was a time and place. If you weren't there, you weren't there. There's not a recording of it. You can't, well, I guess you could record it and you could wander around and kind of eavesdrop on all of the different conversations, which again leads itself to a really strange, ethical and security question. If a VR experience like the one we had last night, like a social experience, is recorded, can I go back and stand there and listen to all the conversations? And what expectations of privacy are there for that? Wow, I pulled that out of my brain because I really legitimately, I mean, if you're having a private conversation with somebody, you've kind of moved away from everybody else, you would never expect that somebody could come there and watch the recording of that. Ooh, wow, that's, whew. Hope we don't do that. Anyway, Anil, speaking of audio and recording these things, last night was interesting because we were in the alt space and there was groups of people talking, and you started to have this cacophony of conversations like you would in a normal place. How do you kind of envision using spatial audio in ways, because right now it's very rudimentary. Like if you're, it's just distance proximity driven, which is, it's good, but what do you envision? How do we, create that environment that feels right, where, you can take a few steps off and whisper to people and do that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. And I guess this also ties into your question of
Please.
Measuring success as well. In that, one thing that always comes up in my classes is when we are engaging with these immersive environments, especially with audio, I always tell my students that we are all experts of spatial sound, right? That's a survival skill. We are all great at pinpointing sources of sound and using that as a way to navigate our lives. But when it comes to spatial audio, there's this gap. So we're experts in one domain that is immediately attached to this computational implementation of that same phenomenon. So the question sort of boils down to how do we bridge that gap? How do we make immersive audio more accessible in these environments? And I think that sort of becomes a measure of success in that research in spatial audio is really extensive. It goes 100 years, and we've figured out a lot of the problems in the audio domain, the analogs of which in the visual domain are now being figured out as we speak. So, emulating the feeling of room, emulating occlusion, emulating distance, as you were saying. We have figured out algorithms for those like many, many years ago, and we've been able to implement those in a computational environment. So the question now sort of comes back to how do we bring that, fold that back into VR experiences? And there are some really exciting opportunities there. There are these advanced systems of, following the ray tracing model in the visual domain and doing a similar thing in the audio domain. So everything in your space is not only reacting to light, but is also reacting to sound, much like in real life. But I think something that's really exciting to me is bringing that sort of novice expertise and spatial sound and making that part of our creative activities in immersive spaces. And I think finding those, figuring out those HCI questions, some of which are extremely relevant to all domains of XR, visual, haptic, is going to be pretty important moving forward. A, to make these experiences more accessible, but also B, to expand the domain of content creators.
Yeah, I think we're making tools to make it easier and easier for visual artists to participate. And I think the tool that you're working on is kind of the audio or sonic equivalent of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Yeah. I'm reading a book right now called Quantum Marketing by the CMO of MasterCard, Raja. And in the book, there's a whole section dedicated to audio and marketing, and how, audio brands and MasterCard has spent, an enormous amount of time and effort and money to create their own sonic brand. And they, it's in everything from their commercials right through to when you pay, the sound that it makes is all tied into this sonic brand. And, when organizations, when people start to think really through audio, it is as powerful as visual. And one thing that that very few people are experimenting with is scent machines. The sense of smell also can bring you to a place instantly. And so I think there's a huge amount of work to be done there. A few years ago at Silicon Valley VR meetup, I got to try a VR thing with a scent machine built into it. And they said, okay, pick up the coffee mug and smell the coffee. I picked it up, I smelled it, smelled like coffee. Okay. They said, pick up the chocolate bar. I picked it up, smelled a bit like coffee and a bit like chocolate, because there was a bit of a mixing, you could tell. And then they said, turn to your left and smell the girl. And I honestly thought they were joking. I was like, what? This is creepy. And I looked over and there was an anime girl and she smelled like perfume, flowers. It was just, I'll never forget it. It was like it was yesterday. And if I ever smell that specific smell again, I will be brought right back there. So smell, touch, we talked about haptic gloves a little bit as well. And, audio is one of the easier ones smells hard. Gloves are hard. These are hard problems to solve. And we're probably not going to have, very cool haptic gloves for another, 5 years. But I can tell you when they come, that adds a whole different level. But audio is now. We're building these experiences now. Something that's interesting in the training sphere, we talk about these, trades being able to train people in trades. And one thing that a friend of mine built was an excavator in VR. And so I sat in it and I got to drive an excavator, but driving the excavator was useless without the sound. The sound, there was somebody talking to me through the radio, the rain was coming down on the hood. Like I felt like I was there and doing it. And I think the whole picture of the sonic with the visuals and the haptics and doing things, it ties it all together into this amazing learning experience. I want to just pass it over back to Joanna and just expand more about what your thoughts are on how we can use all of these sensory things together.
Yeah, one of the things that I think really useful, you mentioned haptics, right now, the way that we're interacting with objects, so imagine that, I have a crystal structure or some other kind of a simulation of a real life thing that you can't really see in the real world, like a crystal structure. If I could take that crystal structure, grab it in front of me and start to pull on it and actually feel the physical response of that thing. Or if I'm teaching a mechanical engineering class and I'm trying to do some kind of a beam bending experiment, or architects are interested in this as well, so if you can take a virtual object and then load it in a realistic way and have it react in a realistic way, I think that would really go a long way for teaching as well. And because how do kids actually learn about the world around them? They play, right? So you take, you're sitting in the high chair and you take your spoon and you throw it over and you see that it falls to the ground, and you do that experiment over and over again and you learn about gravity. So similarly with physical concepts, if we can create some of these different kinds of physical concepts, what happens if you take a crystal and you put it under tension, or if you put it under compression, you can actually start to see what will happen. A dislocation will form after some point, and then the dislocation will slip and you can get some intuition around those kinds of physical phenomena. So I think if we were able to have all of these things together, I'm skeptical on the smell one, so I'm just gonna say that smell is kind of icky to me, not in general, but in this context. But if we have vision and sound and the touch, the haptics, I think that right there we can start replicating true play in a realistic kind of world, and that is very exciting for learning.
All right, I have my ultimate. You guys ready? Vario headset with the haptX gloves and a sub pack. You get the full body haptics, maybe a Tesla suit. You guys see that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm getting the 1 minute warning here. So with that, is there anybody anything else you want to share with the audience here before we wrap up? Anybody? Jonathan, Shalanda? No. Well.
Because this is just the beginning, I would say.
Yeah, it really, really is. It feels like we've been doing it for so long, but it's just the beginning. We're just scratching the surface of what's possible in creating these virtual worlds. So I want to say thank you on behalf of the University of Michigan XR Summit. Thank you for everybody for sticking around. There's still 190 people watching this, so thank you for sticking in with us. And this has been an incredible panel.